Thunder Leader. Now, I want to be clear, I think that this figure is a marvel of engineering. I think there are so many cool things that this figure does, but I wanted to make this video not to hate on it, but just to talk about some criticisms of it I have. I think it's absolutely amazing for some things it did over the original Masterpiece design, like the shape of the arm actually being more accurate compared to the original, I think is awesome. I especially really love the shape of the shoulder pads that they were able to achieve. That's a really important piece to the design's silhouette, and I think the original Masterpiece figure is really lacking in not having those accurate shoulder pad designs from the movie's design. But there are a lot of things that the figure does that I don't really agree with, and when I see people say that this is the definitive version of the 2007 design in figure form, yeah, I mean, I respect that, like what you like, but for me, it's just not it, and I wanted to make a video sharing my opinions why. First of all, I don't like that they upscaled him. I mean, this size is big enough for me, bigger isn't always better. I'd rather him be more accurate size to the official MPM Megatron, which is a figure that I actually like, even though I know a lot of people don't like the coloration of him. Secondly, though, while I still really respect a lot of the things this figure achieved, like the shoulder pads and arm shape that I mentioned, as well as a lot of the other details they bothered to add, like the collapsible wheels, I feel like their priorities were just really off in what they changed. For example, this back kibble, it's super impressive. I mean, it's clearly a huge improvement over the original. And if we take a look at the non-transforming 3-0 Optimus, I think it's so cool that they managed to get the kibble here in the actual rough shape of how it appears in the movie. But in doing so, they made this kibble extremely, extremely fragile. It is absolutely no fun to transform, and I've seen copies of him break there. And why fix that back kibble when you leave his torso area just looking so much worse, in my opinion, than the original Masterpiece figure? I mean, compared to the original Masterpiece figure, this torso area with the red boxy parts around his stomach are just absolutely worse. There's no comparison here compared to the official Masterpiece Optimus. I don't expect him to look as good as this 3-0 Optimus because this is obviously a non-transforming figure and can get away with much better proportions, but it's obvious that this design should look a lot slimmer in the torso, and they just made him really bloated and fat here, and I have no idea why. Maybe it was unfinished, maybe they were going to optimize this even further and they just didn't get around to it, but this really hurts the design in my opinion. And I would take the official Masterpiece Optimus's general silhouette, even with the much less accurate shoulder pads and arms, any day for having that more slim appearance. Similarly, they did some things like make the gun actually be able to transform and integrate into the truck mode, which again, it's a really cool engineering feat, but I just don't care, to be honest. Like, you can make the gun one piece and that's fine with me. And really, the gun just makes the transformation a bit of a chore. I mean, it's already a chore because of the things like the back kibble that I mentioned, and the gun just makes it even more extreme. I'm not usually someone that says I don't like when figures are over-engineered, like the new masterpieces from Takara, but I would say that this figure in particular is a little bit over-engineered, and it kind of ruins the fun of it for me. And speaking of priorities, you know, they cleaned up the back kibble also with respect to the smokestacks, and getting them a bit more close to the inside of the body, as opposed to the official Masterpiece, which has them on the outside. You can see, referencing the non-transforming 3-0 figure, that they should be a lot closer to the head and back. But you know, it's still not anywhere close to how it really should look according to that 3-0 figure. It's much fuller, it's much too big, it's wide and boxy, and I'm not saying that I expect it to be as good as this one, because this one doesn't transform, but if you can't achieve that, then why bother at all? I mean, this really, to me, is good enough. They made the transformation much more convoluted, the figure more fragile, to get something that's really not that close to how it actually should look in the official design, and is really not that big of an improvement over the official Masterpiece in my opinion. Like pretty much any change I've mentioned so far, except maybe the shoulder pads, I would have much rather seen them do to clean up this boxy chest area that looks just so awkward in my opinion. Or I would have really liked to see them work on the head. I think the head sculpt of the original Masterpiece Optimus is easily its weakest aspect, and you can see in add-ons to the Thunder Leader or in the official ROTF non-transforming 3-0 figure that a much better head is clearly possible, clearly something that the figure could use, and they didn't bother to change the head at all. I mean, they changed all this other stuff, they cleaned up the paint, they added all this extra engineering, and they didn't give us a new head sculpt. Even if a better head sculpt was not in the cards, I think neck articulation could have been a big thing that could have been improved. This is really hard to turn. It only goes left, right, up, and down. It doesn't have like a ball joint or anything like that. Whereas the 3.0 Prime clearly demonstrates a much better system for an articulated head. It is much more expressive. It's on a ball joint, and then the neck itself is on yet another hinge joint that can move forward and backward, giving it much more expression. These are more things that I would have liked to see improved. It's the fact that they made a bunch of tiny changes to little areas like the side of the arm or the back that I really don't care about, and that they didn't touch places that I think are just absolutely integral to the design and really take away from the silhouette of the figure. That just drives me crazy. I mean, I know some people might think this is super nitpicky and that I should just appreciate all the other things going on in this figure, but so many of those things are just so little, whereas that is just so big, and the original Masterpiece Optimus' silhouette just really works for me much better. And of course, if I really care about the robot's design, I have no problem with non-transforming figures, and I absolutely love 3.0's take on the figure. Also, I acknowledge that this figure only cost something like $130 when it first came out, which is definitely incredible, but I'm more so speaking about its current state in the secondhand market. I do not see this being worth $300, $400, even $500 like I've seen it go, compared to this figure that is non-transforming, which I'm totally okay with. I get some people don't like non-transforming Transformers, but whatever. I'm totally in love with this figure. I think it's a great representation of the movie Optimus design. If you really want to have an accurate representation of this design sitting on your shelf, I think you have to go non-transforming. I mean, look at how slender this is, look at how tightly packed all the parts look from above. You'll just never achieve that on a transforming figure, and I applaud Thunder Leader for trying, but for me, it just didn't make it. It just made the figure more boxy, more awkward. It doesn't look as unified and as competent as the original Masterpiece movie Optimus, even though it does some things clearly better, including the paint job. I don't know. It's just kind of awkward to me. Its priorities are not in the right places. I have a figure that more accurately depicts the design, if that's what I'm going for. I have a figure that more accurately scales with the other Masterpiece figures and is fun and easy to transform, if that's what I'm going for. So this figure just really has no place in my collection anymore, I feel like. It's a bit overrated in online discussions, in my opinion. It doesn't have its priorities straight. It is overly engineered, and it's just not the definitive version of the movie Optimus design, in my humble opinion. I know a lot of people will disagree with me. I know a lot of people don't like a lot of things about the original movie Masterpiece, which, don't get me wrong, it is far from perfect. And I know a lot of people don't care for non-transforming Transformers figures. But for me, with the original Masterpiece movie Optimus, which I like well enough, and this super awesome, amazingly articulated, well put together non-transforming Optimus, I just don't feel that compelled to compliment Thunder Leader anymore. Anyways, that was kind of a long, undirected rant about Thunder Leader, and it really hinged on one super nitpicky element here in the chest and boxy area, but it's a big deal to me, and I just wanted to make the video because I see so much talk about this figure. I see so many people say how this is the Optimus that you have to get if you're a fan of the design, and that's just not true to me. So I wanted to speak my mind about that, say that I think the original movie Optimus is not so bad. I think the ROTF 3.0 Deluxe Optimus is an absolute gem, and yeah, sorry Thunder Leader.